and plumbing. Cover Source Solutions. We welcome in Steve Robertson, genespage.com, 247 Sports. Steve joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Steve, what did you hear about the scrimmage? Did the defense win the day or win the scrimmage, so to speak, yesterday up in Starkville?
It certainly seems that way. After speaking to Jeff Labby, said the defense was able to create some turnovers, and that was a real issue for Mississippi State last year. Of course, it's the first scrimmage, obviously, but we did not get to observe, and would have liked to have been able to observe. But I thought Labby was pretty, guarded in some comments about praising, certain players or personnel groups or certain, individuals, but he seemed to be pleased with it. And of course, the most important thing is you get some work done and get out of there healthy. And he did knock on the table, and I do commend him for doing so. You don't want to tempt fate in that respect, but it's good to hear some positive praise about the defense, because I do think this offense is going to be pretty good.
All right, you go to all the press conferences and you visited with Lebby in a formal setting and off the air all the time. So if you had to think back to the the post-scrimmage press conference yesterday and kind of his body language and everything that he said, if you could extract anything, what's your one big takeaway from what he said after the scrimmage yesterday?
I think Lebby believes Mississippi State's going to be better. And, you begin to kind of transpose that with last year. Like in the beginning, there's a lot of exuberance because you're a first-time coach and you love all your guys and you're excited. And I think sometimes maybe you're not as forthright about certain things. And that's one thing our fans will say from time to time, that he comes off a little coach speak. Yeah, I didn't think that was the case last night. There have been some situations, too, where he's been very honest about certain personnel groups needing to get better. And last night, he kind of identified the offensive line. They've got to learn to play better as a unit. You expect that, though, because you had so much turnover, and then you go out and you bring in, a handful of guys post-spring practice. And so it's just going to take some time for a first-year offensive line coach at Mississippi State. Lodeholt, of course, comes from Colorado, where he's coached. He's been with Lev for 6 years. But, that's probably the thing on offense that you got to kind of get rolling with. You got to get those guys that did not get the benefit of spring practice up to Mississippi State speed. And I thought Lev was pretty honest about that last night.
Okay. Even though they don't let y'all in, and I think they should, you've been at least able to look at the defensive players. Like last year, it looked like UT Martin players on defense. As you've been able to, the whole eye test, describe what you see when you see the defensive linemen and linebackers for this year, edge rushers and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. And the defensive line looks like what you'd expect an SEC defensive line to look like, at least on the hoof and going through drills, right? I mean, we don't know what they're going to look like until they actually line up against a real opponent, because this time last year, Lebby was talking about how great the offensive line was playing. And they had some moments, and they were pretty good at times, but I think part of that is because the defensive line was so poor, and you just didn't have a point of reference until you went out and played Arizona State and gave up, 360-something yards on the ground. I think that's an important aspect of it. But of the groups that I'm probably most excited about on defense is the linebacker room. I do think they have some real playmakers there. I do think they'll be better up front, and by kind of following that same line of thinking, you're better up front. It gives your linebackers the ability to fit gaps and make plays. And last year, Stone Bland and those guys, Isaac Smith, who plays primarily in the box, those guys had to make all the tackles because the guys up front didn't. I went through some numbers over the weekend. There was one game, I think your leading defensive lineman, tackle-wise, there was like 4 or 5 guys that had one tackle. Yeah, I didn't know how that's possible, right? You think at some point you just kind of get run over and credited with a tackle. But they weren't making any tackles, and linebackers were. But I like the look of this linebacker group. What Zakari Tilman did last year, and he was a guy that kind of shined in 2023. There was a lot of talk about playing him as a true freshman, and he did play a little bit. And you begin to think about, he may be a two-deeper, He was a guy last year that once you put him on the field, you could barely get him off. But, Jalen Smith looks good running around out there. And, of course, Isaac Smith is basically playing the same position he did last year. He is a box safety and played about half of the snaps last year in the box. And, he's never going to be an over-the-top type safety. That's just not who he is. But I like the look of this linebacker group, and those guys can really run. And I think, with McIntyre and Rhodes kind of also putting their eyes on this thing, I think you're kind of getting some guys in the right spots.
Steve Robertson, Gene's Page, 247 Sports. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. It's a big year in Starkville. Year 2 for Levy. They went 2-10. You can't go over in the league again. A lot on the line, but they also did some really good things in the offseason, bringing in 33 players in the portal class, which Steve was just talking about. Now, Tilman, high school player. I mean, this guy's got a chance to be really good, don't you think, Steve? Zakari?
The thing that I love about he's just a gamer. Like you put him in there last year. Next thing you know, he's getting a sack and he's getting a handle on a punt. Always in there doing something right. And this is a guy from Florence High School, obviously, that kind of outgrew the safety position. He was primarily recruited as a safety by a lot of people, but he was a tweener. And the next thing you know, his senior year, he is absolutely a linebacker, but he has those coverage abilities, that he had from all his years of playing safety at Florence. But the thing that I just love about him is it just doesn't matter what situation you put him in there. He is a guy that understands you have to go get the football, and he will go get the football. He just is one of those people that has the ability to kind of naturally diagnose a play, follow the flow, identify the ball carrier, and go make a play. And I think he's going to have a big year. I think he's going to be a big part of Mississippi State's blitz packages. And I think he's a guy, number one, that wants to be at Mississippi State, and that makes a big difference.
All right, number 1 and 2 edge rushers on the team for MSU.
Yeah, well, we don't get to see a lot of the team drills, so it's kind of difficult to identify that. But, I think when you begin to kind of work through that group and the fact that you've got Vincent Dancy now, a guy that's coaching outside backers and those edge guys, I think they're obviously, going to get better because you've had an influx of talent, but now you've got a new way of really doing things, and I think that's when you want to engage guys that maybe perhaps haven't had a lot of success, you give them a new way to do it, right? You don't just go out there and say, okay, we're going to do the same thing we did last year. We're going to run the same fires, and we're just going to get better at it. I think to get guys to get buy-in, you've got to give them something to get excited about. And I believe Dancy coming in has really done that. And I think the next part of that, the development, is it kind of keeps opponents off balance too, because you don't know exactly, hey, well, what are these new ideas? With all these new eyes on the defensive side, everybody's going to have a different way of maybe changing some things from last year's fires, and you're going to have a situation too where I think that with all the personnel and all of the new ways of doing things, you're going to have some people that maybe are unprepared from what we saw on film last year. Like this Malik Sealer kid from A&M, guy that didn't play a whole lot last year. Got a ton of potential. We've heard some good things about him. You need some rangy, lengthy edge guys. You don't just want to go out there with all these tweeners and just kind of hope for the best. And I think at times last year, that's kind of what Mississippi State had to do. I don't think you're in that same situation this year. And Trevion Williams, a guy that's not really going to play an edge, he's going to play more of a 5-tech. He led Mississippi State defensive linemen in tackles last year. And I think, and that was with him playing more on the interior. I think he's probably in a more natural position now, and will probably benefit from that. I think this could be a really big year for him, and State needs him to have a really big year this year. But,
golly, highly recruited, right down I-55 South. Was he the number 1 or number 2 player that year? It feels like forever ago. Didn't Arnett and Leach sign him? But, this is a guy, to say that he needs to turn the corner, good Lord, understatement here. Is he ready to go, Steve?
Yeah. And I think, too, he looks like if you were going to, make a guy on the creative player type thing on the NCAA college football game, it'd look a lot like him. He has it, but, he hadn't had a lot of starts. I mean, he's had some, but, he's got us been banged up at times. He looks to be doing really well. And the guy that I was referencing to, Brandon Jennings, as far as the edge goes, I think he'll probably be your first snap guy. And I think he and Trevion Williams both are probably in the best shape of their careers. But, Trevion Williams is an NFL guy, and he needs to go out there and play like an NFL guy this year in hopes of getting to the NFL.
Okay. Steve Robertson on the Out of Bounds show. Word out of the scrimmage is that the defense, won, or I don't know if dominated, maybe two. I did have someone say that they dominated. Everybody's got their own kind of way to frame it up. I actually think that's a good thing. And Steve made a great point. Votler and Levy and all them added 5 offensive linemen after the spring, so it's going to take a second for these guys to figure it out, and gives the defense an advantage. Even though they lost their most talented wide receiver, in my opinion, in the last 25 years, in Kevin Coleman to Missouri in the portal, and he had a really good year considering a true freshman was throwing to him most of the time who wasn't accurate, in Michael Van Buren. I'm hearing collectively as a group they really like the wide receivers. Obviously, the Oklahoma transfer. What are you hearing, Steve?
Yeah, much of the same. And that was the thing Bumpus brought up on his media opportunity here 10 days or so ago, a couple weeks ago, is that Coleman left, but the numbers didn't, because in this offense that's going to be a position of emphasis. And you look at Evans and you look at Brennan Thompson. I think collectively the group may have more talent. And this time last year, we didn't know what Kevin Coleman was going to be. I mean, we knew that he was highly regarded coming out of high school, and he had not done a whole lot in his previous 2 stops. And it's weird to talk about this as his 4th stop in 4 years. But, Kevin Coleman was not a household name anywhere this time last year. And then next thing you know, he gets rolling. And he is a very, very talented individual. I don't think there's any question about that. But there's a part of me that wonders how much of that just being a product of the system, and so that's something you begin to think about too, is that, Kevin comes in here and Levy and Bump know how to use him, and then all of a sudden he has nearly 1,000, yards receiving on a 2-10 football team, and so
with a true freshman the majority of the year who wasn't accurate.
Absolutely. And a guy that couldn't see the field, I mean, it's like once you get through that, first or second read, I mean, just the speed of the game kind of gets to him sometimes, and he'll be better, down the road, no matter where he ends up after LSU.
Sure.
But I think you got to have some confidence in Jeff Levy, and I think that's one of those things you go back and look historically. He did it at Central Florida, he did it at Ole Miss, he did it at Oklahoma, and one would think he would be able to do it here at Mississippi State.
All right. What is it? 2 more scrimmages? Like they do another one this weekend and another one the next, and then they basically just shut them down and start to get ready for Southern Miss? How does it work, Steve?
That's pretty accurate. I mean, of course, that last week you're going to be a little bit lighter, and you're going to kind of go through that walkthrough that towards the end of it. But I mean, guys are still fighting for jobs, and that's the thing too. You got to settle the depth chart.
Good thing.
Of course, of the next 2 weeks, because once you get into that last week of August, you want to have your depth chart settled. You're just kind of going through your game plan and things of that nature. I mean, guys will be on the scout team and running the Southern Miss offense and defense, or what you expect that to be. So you got time, but you don't have a lot of time to make an impression. You got to make some things happen, probably within the next 10 days, just because once we get into game week, it's all going to be settled. It's going to be too late to move.
All right, you and I have hit on this. I'm going to continue to beat the drum. Because I think I read your board and I read Six Pack, and I took about a week break. I think I just needed it. And so then I got back in town and read it over the weekend, Steve. And there's too many people in the fan base who don't believe that Mississippi State can win in football. And it's this, woe is me, poor us type deal. And here's the way first of all, they went and spent close to $15 million on this roster. Okay. And you just said it, and others, I'm talking other people who are wired in, that they're much bigger, faster, and stronger. So we'll see what that looks like. They'll be much, much better. And don't you think the mentality should be, Steve, that this team, it's an SEC team, should go 4-0 out of the gate? I mean, I don't think that's a daunting schedule. Arizona State is pretty good, but they don't recruit near to the level of Mississippi State, and they didn't spend near as much as Mississippi State did in the portal. And so why wouldn't you look at the schedule and say 4-0, that's the expectations, that's what you have to go get? What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think it's okay to expect good things.
Right.
You know, I mean, I think when you constantly forecast failure, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, Jeff Lebby is a winner. And I know you get him here, and he's kind of inheriting a mess because, you know, we had this hodgepodge football season in 23 where, you know, Arnett decided we want to completely scrap the offense and run everybody off, even though you had all the tools there to win in 23. And so Leb's situation has some air raid concepts, but, you know, it's different, and it's certainly different than what Kevin Barbay trotted out there. And so you inherited a roster that maybe didn't fully fit what you wanted. You went out and tried to make some adjustments in the portal and get this roster up to your expectations, and it's taken 2 years to do it. And I've watched that little documentary thing over the weekend, and you know, people always want to kind of use a lot of hyperbole and stuff. This wasn't a bad offensive roster last year. It was a bad defensive roster, and I think now you go out and get these guys now from the portal that look and kind of move more like SEC players. And it's just so interesting. One of the things that I read sometimes is like, well, yeah, there were so many of those guys that were G5 players. Yeah, and we beat out a handful of Power 5 teams for every one of those guys. And so they're guys that just develop at different rates. But, I think you've got to expect to win. It's like I see people out here just chasing these, ghosts of Reggie Collier out here. I mean, it's like, my goodness. I mean, all due respect to Charles Huff, Southern Miss went 1-11 last year. And there are people sitting around, clutching their pearls, worrying about this ball game. Mississippi State, from a talent standpoint, at least on paper, is better than Southern Miss. Now, Huff's going to treat this game like a Super Bowl. It's the first game of Southern Miss, and he's playing his former employer. But I don't think anybody objectively can look at this and say Mississippi State shouldn't win this game. Vegas certainly seems to think so. So you go get that game. You got Arizona State coming in, completely different team in many respects from last year. You don't have Cam Scatterbo, but you got to deal with Sam Levitt, who didn't have a good game against Mississippi State last year. And so that's probably the most important game of the year, as we've talked about. You should breeze through Alcorn. Northern Illinois, obviously, coming to your place, should be a game that you win. I mean, so I think 3-1 a worst-case scenario. But, 4-0 is certainly possible, especially if they can get through Arizona State.
All right. Do you think Kamario Taylor plays every game? Or do you think it's only going to be when they're up, or do you think they'll, even like when they're on the 30, let's say they're playing Arizona State. They're on the Arizona State 30-yard line, Steve. Levy's looking at it going, okay, he's got the analytics guy. Here's the percentage that we convert a 47-yard, 52-yard field goal. Or it's 4th and 1, and I can bring in Kamario Taylor to run the zone read. I mean, how do you think that looks or shakes out throughout the season, Steve?
Well, there's a couple things you have to look at. Number one, you sign players to play it.
Damn right.
I mean, that's the point, right? I mean, you sign them to come in here and play. And that's something that Lebanon are going to have to understand as they work through the quarterback room. But the reality of it is, I think ideally what you'd love to be able to do is to redshirt Kamario and kind of give yourself a little distance between he and Kromenhoek. Kromenhoek, of course, played last year, but if you redshirt Kamario, all of a sudden there's like 2 years in between them. And listen, I can't tell you that, Luke's going to win that quarterback competition next year. I mean, Kamario is a bit of a freak, but he's a guy that's still learning the college game. And I know people are eager to see him play, but you got to be patient with his development. So it'll be interesting to see how they use him, but I can guarantee you this. If somebody said, hey, Kamario, we're going to put a package in for you in the red zone and we need you to kind of execute that throughout the year, he's going to be all on board with that. Kamario's not thinking about getting his master's degree at this point. I mean, at this point, he didn't look at that aspect of it, right? He's looking at the fact that I want to go win football games. This is my chance to help my team win. So I think he's going to be on board with whatever Jeff Lebby does, but Jeff Lebby's got to look at the bigger picture.
Okay. I hope he plays a lot. I mean, situationally, like I just drew up for, against Arizona State or whatever. And I say burn the red shirt, let him play. I wish Shapen being the lead dog, but we'll see. All right. Well, anything else that we need to know? I mean, are you going to Two Brothers to get the bacon mac today? I mean, what's happening?
Yeah, that's a good move. That's not on the agenda today, but we talk about the running back room, we talk about the wide receiver room. The one room that we get a lot of comments from the coaches has been this tight end room. Obviously you got Sadie Traore back, but that's a room that looks completely different. John Cooper's done a really good job in the offseason. Got some new guys, obviously, but somebody asked me about that yesterday, and because having a great tight end gives you freedom.
I saw that.
When it comes to your play calling, and so I'm eager to see, because it seems like every coach that comes through Starkville, everybody's always like, well, he's going to use a tight end more. Well, I believe Jeff Ladbig, and I think he's got some tight ends that it could be some difference makers. I thought it did times last year. They were able to kind of create some mismatches that were advantageous to the offense. But now that you've got, Sadu in the system now, this system, for his second year, I think he's a guy that could have a big year for you. And, again, I think that position in the group kind of gets overshadowed at times.
My God, if they could get some juice out of the tight end room, unbelievable what that could do for Levy's offense. All right. Thanks, Steve. We'll talk soon.
See you, bud.
GenesPage.com, 247 Sports. Defense won the first scrimmage. Depends on who you talk to by how much. We're live in the Bank Plus studio. That interview was brought to you by the amazing food and good times in Starkville, Mississippi. Two Brothers. Awesome bar and restaurant in the Cotton District. Their new sister restaurant, Older Brother Bistro. Try the muffaletta, the Reuben, deviled eggs, drizzled honey, little bacon crumbles, all at Older Brother Bistro in the Cotton District in Starkville.